Okay, I'm about ready to do the last disconnections on the engine and pull it out. I've got my engine stand ready to bolt the engine to. This is a three-legged stand, and I've heard stories about people having them tip on them once the weight of the engine was on it. So I built this frame and I put some legs that are about 1 inch off the floor so that if it would start to tip, I think that's going to give me enough of a chance to go get it upright again before it goes all the way over. Got one on each side. They're about 1 inch off the floor, so it will allow it to start to tip before it catches it. And I don't know even if it would hold all the weight, but I'm just betting that it will hold it long enough for me to muscle it upright. Okay, back over to the car here. You can see a jack stand there towards the left. That is under the front end of the transmission, because once we go and pull the engine out, there's nothing left to support the front end of that transmission. So we've got that supported. I've got the hoist in place. I've got the engine leveler attached to the blocks. Now, my chains on my engine leveler were not long enough to actually fit across this V8. I had to add some fixed steel extensions to the brackets where they bolt to the block so that I could get enough space above my carburetor for the engine mount. I really didn't want to take the manifold off if I don't have to, and those chains on that mount, on that leveler, just weren't long enough. Now I've put a little bit of pressure on the engine, not much, because I have to get those motor mount bolts out, but I want the engine supported whenever I do that. So onto the motor mounts. Okay, the motor mounts, the bolt goes in from the back and it has a nut on the front. The back bolt is a 5/8. The front nut is an 11/16. That came out nice and easy. I have to crawl under there and find that nut. I'll do the same thing on the other side, and then we'll address where the bell housing bolts up to the engine. This is the motor mount bolt. You'll notice there was a washer on each side, and the nut is one of those that kind of self-locks on there. So if you should need to replace your motor mounts, you don't want to just go get a regular bolt. You want something that's the nut's gonna go on and lock. Okay, the other motor mount is out. I was a little bit surprised how easily the bolts actually slid out of the mounts, not so much how tight they were. I already have taken 2, which is all there were, of the bell housing bolts out on the other side. Kind of troubles me that there were only 2, but they're also 2 different lengths, and this one may be too short. Didn't appear to go very far into the block. So we've got 3 more of those on this side. And we've got to disconnect the vacuum line to the modulator on the distributor, or on the transmission. These bolts all appear to be a longer variety. So I'm thinking they lost a couple of the bolts and just put what they had on, which happened to be a short one. Now, I've got to disconnect this vacuum fan to the modulator. That's pretty easily done. I'll try to get this out of the way. This is the dipstick for the transmission. Just rotate it out of the way. And then ready to start to lift the engine. I noticed that it already started to separate at the bottom of the bell housing there. So here we go. I'll be very careful about how we do this because we have to make sure that everything comes out easy. I think I may even take the motor mounts off of the engine just to allow me to slip the engine forward without lifting it very high. So I am going to do that. If I recall right, those were 9/16 bolts there. Okay, the motor mounts are disconnected. They were 9/16 bolts. Now I'm going to try to gently pry the bell housing away from the engine. I hope you can see it's not taking a whole lot of pressure. I'm going to go over to the other side, maybe give this one pump up first, go over to the other side and separate it on that side. It is loose all around. The motor mount's just separated. What's hanging me up is, well, apparently not anymore. On the top here, it was hitting on the top. Get the engine a little forward to clear the flywheel, and then we'll be off. Lower the back a little bit. shifted the balance on the engine. And there we go. Before I get too drastic on that, I just want to clear of everything. That was the motor mount that just fell back there. No big deal. I can change the balance again. Make the engine sit more level. That'll help us a bit. Okay. It's out. It's just a matter of pumping it up now and wheeling it away from the chassis. I don't know if that's bolted on there or not. The other side was not. Okay, that looks like that's high enough to clear the chassis. I have to move the camera in order to be able to wheel the engine out of there. So next thing is get it over to the engine stand. I may have to wheel my toolbox out of the way in order to do that. Okay, there's ironically a little problem with the extra supports I put on there to prevent it from tipping. It won't allow me to go completely over the in between the wheels. I may have to take those off temporarily, but they will go back on in order to provide me that stability. It's just is about 6 inches short. So I will pull those off and then I'll be able to get it in there, and I'll just go ahead and bolt the engine block where the bell housing fits it to the engine stand, and disconnect the engine hoist and the leveler. Okay, I got it on the engine stand, and if you notice, the engine stand has these extensions where it connects so that you can fit over the flywheel. So I was having trouble finding long enough bolts that happened to be 3/8. I had longer bolts that were bigger, but I didn't realize that the bolts in the block that hold the bell housing on were only going to be 3/8. So I had to scramble and get some bolts. It turns out these two on the right hand side, I borrowed those from the where the bracket for the power steering pump goes on. So I've still got the weight on the hoist at this point, but I am ready to go ahead and lower that, or shouldn't say lower, I relieve the weight on the hoist. This does not have a bolt to secure it here, so I have to make sure that that's all the way in. A little bit surprised at that because it is a pretty heavy duty engine stand, but no bolt holding that in. Okay, that balancer was on the screw from the carburetor, so you can see the weight is now all on the engine stand. So I can disconnect the hoist and I can move the engine out of the way while I continue to dismantle the chassis.